The folder was burgundy leather with brass corners, and Brooke slid it across the Thanksgiving table the way a card dealer slides you a hand she has already read. "Harold," she said, with the smile she used on clients, "we think it is time to talk about your future." I set down my fork. The turkey was still steaming. The cranberry sauce sat untouched in Diane's good crystal bowl, and my son Daniel was staring at his plate like the answer to something was written in the gravy. Nobody at that table was breathing quite right, and I had spent enough years in rooms like that to know what it meant. I opened the folder. The first page said, "Durable Power of Attorney" across the top, and my full legal name, Harold James Brenner, was already typed onto the signature block. Somebody had been confident. The second page was worse. It was a list, neat and dated, under a heading that read, "Documented Concerns Regarding Harold's Cognitive Health." I had missed a doctor's appointment. I had shown up to the wrong restaurant on my own son's birthday. And on the 11th of October, I had supposedly gotten lost driving to a pharmacy that sits 4 minutes from my front door. Here is the thing about the 11th of October. I was not lost. I was 211 miles away in Terre Haute, Indiana, standing in a cold drizzle at the funeral of a man I had worked beside for 20 years. I had the gas station receipt from that trip taped inside the little notebook riding in my jacket pocket, because I have been taping receipts into notebooks my entire adult life. That habit was the first thing nobody at that table knew about me. The second thing was bigger. Everyone in that dining room believed I was a retired government bookkeeper stretching a pension. The truth is that for 32 years, the United States Treasury paid me to catch people who lie on paper. I looked down at the empty signature line waiting for my name. Then I looked up at the woman my son loved, with her client smile and her burgundy folder, and one quiet thought crossed my mind. "Sweetheart, you have no idea whose table you just dealt cards at. Before I tell you what I did next, let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated because of your age? Have you ever watched somebody talk over a person you love as if that person were already gone? If you have, tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight, because you are exactly who this story is for. And if you want to hear how a 74-year-old man in a mended cardigan turned that folder inside out, stay with me and consider subscribing, because what happened at that table was only the opening move. My name is Harold Brenner. Most folks call me Hal. I am 74 years old, and I live in Beaver Creek, Ohio, in the same brick ranch house that Ruth and I bought in 1979 for about what a decent used truck costs today. The gutters are original. So am I. If you passed me at the hardware store, you would not look twice. I drive a 2003 Ford pickup with a tailgate that argues with you before it opens. I wear a gray cardigan with one elbow that Ruth mended so well, you have to know where to look to find it. Every Tuesday morning I drink coffee at the Skyline Diner on Dayton-Xenia Road. Same booth, same waitress, same 2 eggs over medium. I mow my own grass. I clean my own gutters, though my knees have recently opened negotiations on that subject. People look at all of that, and they do the math, and the math they do is wrong. Neighbors assume I am squeaking by on Social Security. Cashiers speak to me slowly and kindly. Once, a young man at the bank offered to help me understand the difference between checking and savings, and I thanked him warmly, because there was no reason on earth to tell him that I once traced $11 million through 14 shell companies without ever leaving my desk. For 32 years, I was a special agent with the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. Not an auditor, not the fellow who checks your arithmetic in April. My unit carried badges and firearms, and what we hunted was money. Embezzlers, launderers, the polite criminals I used to call them, the ones with soft hands and good haircuts who never once raise their voice while they empty out somebody's life savings. When people asked what I did for a living, I always said I was an accountant for the government, which is technically true, the way saying a wolf is a kind of dog is technically true. It kept dinner parties short, and Ruth liked me humble. Ruth. 6 years she has been gone now, and some mornings I still set out 2 coffee cups before my hands remember. Cancer took her in 14 months, and never once asked our opinion. The government spent 3 decades teaching me how to walk into dangerous rooms. Nobody ever taught me how to walk into a quiet house. For a long while, the loudest thing in the world was her empty side of the closet. But Ruth left me 2 things that outlasted the grief. The first was a saying she would bring out every time somebody new came into our lives. "Hal," she would tell me, "folding laundry or icing a cake, if you want to know what a person is truly made of, let them believe you are easy to fool." For years, I thought that was just my wife being clever. It took me most of a lifetime to understand she had handed me a tool. The second thing she left me was our son. Daniel is 39, and he teaches 8th grade American history at a middle school over in Kettering. He grades papers with a green pen instead of a red one, because he read somewhere that red ink says you failed, and green ink says you can still grow. And if that tells you anything about my boy, it tells you everything. Every fall he runs a unit he calls Primary Sources, where he makes a room full of 13-year-olds hunt down the original document, instead of trusting what somebody said about the document. He got his mother's heart, and just enough of my suspicion to survive a faculty meeting. 3 years ago, Daniel brought a woman named Brooke Callahan to my kitchen table. She was 33 then, sharp as a new pencil, a senior financial advisor at a big wealth management firm up in Columbus called Meridian Crest. And I will tell you the truth here, because this story does not work without it. I liked her. She remembered Ruth's name from the photographs on my hallway wall. She asked about the peonies Ruth had planted along the back fence, and wrote down the variety. She even brought a peach cobbler she had baked from some recipe she found online, because Daniel had mentioned his mother used to make one. It was not as good as Ruth's. It was close enough to sting, and I respected the effort. She was good to my son. She laughed at his history jokes, which requires either real love or real acting talent. When they got engaged a year and a half ago, I stood in their backyard with a glass of lemonade and thought, "Ruth, I believe our boy is going to be all right." I want you to remember that I thought that. Because the woman who slid a burgundy folder across a Thanksgiving table did not arrive all at once. She arrived one small comment at a time, the way water arrives in a basement. There is one more thing you need to know about me, because everything that happened later leans on it. My first year on the job, 1978, Cincinnati field office, I was assigned to a training agent named Raymond Delgado. Ray was a compact man with a voice like gravel in a coffee can, and the first thing he ever handed me was not a case file. It was a pocket notebook. "Memory is a witness that changes its story every time you call it," Ray told me. "Ink does not. Date, time, who, what. Every single day, Brenner. No exceptions. I have filled 181 of those notebooks since. They stand on a shelf in my den like short brown soldiers. Retirement never broke the habit, because a habit like that was never about the job. It is about respect for the truth. When my pharmacy changes a price, I write it down. When a roofer quotes me a number in my driveway, I write it down. And starting about a year and a half ago, when my future daughter-in-law began saying certain things in a certain tone, I wrote those down too. At the time, I told myself I was just being an old man with a pen. I was wrong. I was being a witness. Looking back through the notebooks now, the first entry that matters is dated the 3rd Sunday of June, a year and a half before that Thanksgiving. Sunday dinner at my house. Pot roast. Brooke was standing at my kitchen counter, looking at the little wire basket where I keep my mail, and she lifted my property tax bill by one corner, the way you might lift something that had been on the floor of a bus. "You know, Harold," she said, "at some point we really should do a little housekeeping on all of this. Housekeeping. I want you to remember that word, because she never once said money. She said housekeeping. She said paperwork. She said simplify. In my working years, I learned that people rename a thing right before they take it. That night I wrote it down. Date, time, who, what. It seemed like nothing. Most beginnings do. Through that winter, the comments came about once a month, always small, always wearing kindness like a winter coat. At Christmas, she noticed I still balance a paper checkbook and called it charming, in the exact tone people use to call a rotary phone charming. In February, she asked Daniel, right in front of me, whether I had ever considered one of those senior communities where everything is taken care of for you. I said the only community taking care of my lawn was me and a craftsman mower, and everybody laughed. And I noticed she laughed the longest. Then came March, and my son's birthday, and the first entry where my pen pressed hard enough to leave a groove in the page. Daniel turned 39 on the 12th of March. Brooke organized the dinner, the way she organized everything, and on Wednesday she texted me the details herself. Carver's on Far Hills. 6:30. Do not be late, mister. I got there at 6:15, because I have not been late to anything since the Carter administration. I sat in that steakhouse for 40 minutes with a basket of bread and a glass of water, watching the door. Finally, I texted Daniel. His reply came fast. Dad, where are you? We are all at Mama DeSalvo's. We said DeSalvo's. I drove over. Dinner was half finished. I made the old man joke everybody needed me to make, and I ate cold lasagna, and I watched my son watch me with a new little crease between his eyes. 2 weeks later, Daniel came by the house alone and said, gently, the way you talk to a man on a ledge, Dad. Brooke mentioned you have seemed a little off lately. The restaurant thing worried her. She says it is happening more often. That evening I sat at my kitchen table and scrolled back through my phone to the Wednesday before his birthday. There it was, in blue and white. Carver's on Far Hills. 6:30. Do not be late, mister. I printed the screen, taped it into the notebook, and for the first time in 181 notebooks, I added a fifth line underneath Ray Delgado's 4. Why? In June, the Callahans hosted a cookout at their place in Westerville, and that was the first time I really spent an afternoon with Brooke's father. Gene Callahan is 71, a pharmacist who stood behind the same counter for 40 years, and he is the only man I know who reads a mustard label twice before he puts it on a bratwurst. I ribbed him about it. He did not laugh. He said, 40 years behind a pharmacy counter taught me that the most dangerous errors always come in clean handwriting. Then he handed me the mustard. When I was leaving, Gene walked me out to my truck, which nobody does anymore, and he stood there a moment with his hands in his pockets. Harold, he said, anything anybody ever hands you to sign, read it twice, sign it once. Then he looked at me one beat longer than the sentence needed, and he went back inside. I sat in my truck and wrote that down too. Under the fifth line, the Y line, I wrote nothing. I did not have anything to write yet. On the 4th of July, in my own backyard, I told the story about Walt Metzger's pontoon boat and the raccoon, which is a good story and I tell it well. Halfway through, Brooke laid her hand on my arm, soft as a nurse, and said, You told us this one at Easter, remember? I had not told it at Easter. I know my inventory. But here is the mean genius of a claim like that. Deny it, and you sound defensive. Go quiet, and you sound caught. Around the picnic table, a couple of the guests traded a look they thought I did not see, and my son's smile flickered like a bulb about to go. I finished the story shorter than it deserved. That night, I wrote it down. In August, my cardiologist's office called to confirm that I had canceled my September checkup. I had not canceled anything. The receptionist, a nice young woman named Kayla, checked the record and said a family member had called on my behalf on Tuesday. I rebooked the appointment, thanked her, and wrote down her name and the time of the call. Any one of those things alone is nothing. A mix-up, a busy season, a story half remembered. That is the design of it. But my notebook now held 5 entries in 6 months, and every one of them leaned the same direction, like trees after a windstorm. In my old line of work, we had a name for a series of small moves each size to stay under the radar. We called it structuring. And structure, friends, always has an architect. Then, in the second week of September, my brokerage sent me a thank you letter for something I never did, and the pen in my pocket turned into a shovel. The letter was 1 page on nice stock. Thank you for scheduling your family financial consultation for October, it said. We look forward to discussing your goals. I read it twice at the kitchen table, with Ruth's clock ticking on the wall, and then I called the number on the letterhead. A polite young man named Tyler pulled up my account. Yes, sir, he said. Your daughter called on Tuesday on your behalf. She mentioned the family was looking at consolidating your accounts under a family advisor at Meridian Crest for easier management. I said, Son, I do not have a daughter. There was a pause you could have parked my truck in. Then, well, she said, I apologize, sir. I told him no apology was needed. I asked him to cancel the appointment and to put a note on the account, in writing. No changes of any kind, from anyone, unless I walk in myself with identification. He read the note back to me. I thanked him and hung up. I sat there a while. My coffee had gone cold in the cup, and I had not noticed it going. And then I smiled, not because anything was funny, because the waiting was over. For 6 months I had been an old man with suspicions, and an old man with suspicions is a sad and powerless thing. As of that phone call, I was something I knew exactly how to be. I was an investigator with an open case. The first stop cost me nothing, and I want to give it to you, because it might cost you nothing someday too. I went into my den, woke up the computer Daniel bought me, and typed in a website that every family in America ought to have taped to the refrigerator. brokercheck.finra.org. It is free, it is public, and it is run by the people who regulate the brokerage industry. You type in the name of any licensed financial advisor in this country, and it shows you their history, their licenses, their employers, and any disclosures, complaints, disputes, settlements. I typed in Brooke Callahan, 11 years registered, 2 firms, and 1 disclosure, from 4 years back. A customer dispute. The customer was an elderly widow. The allegation was unauthorized trading, meaning moves made in her account that she said she never approved. The matter was settled for $95,000, paid by the firm, with no admission of wrongdoing. Now, settled is a word that lives in the middle of the road. In my career, I watched innocent people settle just to stop the bleeding, and I watched guilty people settle to hide the wound. A single settlement is not a verdict, but it is a thread. For the next pull, I needed help, and I knew exactly whose. The following Tuesday, a woman slid into my booth at the Skyline Diner before my eggs arrived, which is how she has been entering rooms for 50 years. Marcy Kowalski was my partner for 22 of my 32 years. The sharpest financial mind I ever worked beside. And these days, she is a certified fraud examiner, which means banks and law firms now pay her handsomely to find what she used to find for a government salary. I laid it all out. The comments, the restaurant, the doctor's office, the letter. Then I slid the notebook across the table, and Marcy read all 5 entries without saying one word, which for Marcy is a religious experience. She closed the notebook. Legal and public sources only, Hal? Legal and public only, I said. This stays clean. She nodded. Give me 10 days. She took 9. The manila envelope she set on my table was thin, but thin envelopes have ended bigger men. County records first. Brooke's condo in the short north had been refinanced twice in 3 years, and a home equity line had been opened in April. Then the part that came from a friend still inside the industry, all of it talk that travels the way talk travels. In August, Brooke had taken a margin call. If you have never had the pleasure, a margin loan is when you borrow money to buy investments, and when those investments drop, the lender calls and wants its money now, and I promise you, that call is never friendly. Add it together, and Marcy put her personal debt at around $278,000, not counting the mortgage, with payments running about $9,400 a month. No advisor's paycheck carries that weight for long. And then the clock. Meridian Crest had merged in April with a bigger outfit out of Chicago, and the new owners had handed every advisor a number. $25 million in client assets under management by the 31st of December, or termination. Brooke's book of clients stood at about $22.9 million. She is $2 million short, Marcy said, with $9,400 a month bleeding out of her, and a clock on the wall. Now do me a favor, Hal. Go add up your own accounts. I did not need to. I know my accounts the way Daniel knows the Bill of Rights. Between the retirement account, the brokerage account, the treasuries, and Ruth's old annuity, it comes to a little over $2.3 million. Marcy leaned back in the booth and said the first of 2 sentences, I will carry the rest of my days. You are not her father-in-law, Hal. You are her year-end. Then she got quieter, which with Marcy means more serious. 30 years of fraud work taught me one thing about elder financial abuse, she said. It is the only crime I know where the victim usually ends up apologizing to the thief. Do not be that victim. And Hal, do not become the other thing either. I asked what other thing. The man's so busy winning, she said, that he forgets his son is standing in the blast radius. That sentence is what sent me to Daniel's house that Thursday, while Brooke was at a conference in Chicago. He made chili. I let the evening breathe, and then I brought up the birthday mix-up, easy as asking about the weather. and said I never did see where everybody agreed on DeSalvo's. Show me the thread. I am curious. He scrolled and handed me the phone without a flicker of hesitation, and that lack of hesitation told me half of what I needed. The group message told me the rest. There was Brooke, telling everyone, DeSalvo's it is. And there, in a separate message to just my son, was Brooke again. Your dad insists on Carver's for some reason. I will remind him where we actually are. Daniel took the phone back and looked at me with his mother's eyes. Dad, can I ask you something? He said. Brooke thinks we need a plan for you. Is everything okay? Be straight with me. I spent 32 years reading faces across interview tables. Worry has a look. An angle has a different look. There was nothing in my boy's face but love wearing its shoes on the wrong feet. He was a passenger in this, not a driver, and the relief of knowing that nearly buckled my knees under the table. Everything is fine, son, I told him, and by Christmas it will be finer. That was not a lie. It was a forecast, which left exactly one conversation to have before Thanksgiving. Not with Brooke, with a lawyer. Carl Jennings has practiced elder law in Dayton for 30 years, out of an office above a bakery on Brown Street, so every hard conversation up there smells like cinnamon. I gave him 40 minutes of it. The notebook, the letter, the printouts. He listened the way good lawyers and good priests listen, and when I finished, he tapped the folder Brooke would later slide across a table, the kind of document it contained, and said the sentence I now repeat to every gray head who will hold still for it. Harold, a durable power of attorney, is the most powerful document most Americans never read. Done right, it is a shield for your old age. Done wrong, it hands somebody your checkbook while you are still alive to watch them spend it. He told me something else, and you can check this one yourself, because it sits right in the Ohio statute on powers of attorney. In this state, a financial power of attorney has to be notarized to be worth anything. Remember that detail. It comes back. Carl and I built the defense in 3 moves. First, and I will admit this one stung my pride, a full cognitive evaluation. 2 hours at the medical center with a neuropsychologist. Word lists. Puzzles. Drawing the face of a clock. I had not been that nervous since my federal polygraph in 1978. When it was over, the doctor told me my scores sat well above average for my age, and she wrote me a letter on her letterhead saying exactly that. It is a strange thing, friends, to carry a piece of paper proving your own mind. It is a stranger thing to need one. Second, a revocable living trust. My accounts went into it, with Daniel and the trust department of a Dayton bank named as co-trustees, so that from that day forward, no single set of hands, however loved, would ever be alone with the money. Including my own hands someday, if age truly does come for me. That is not distrust. That is architecture. Third, a flag at every institution I do business with. No changes by phone, no changes by family. In person, with identification, or not at all. Now, here is what I did not do, and I know some of you are hollering it at whatever you are listening to me on. I did not confront her. I did not call my son, and I want to give you my reasons, because they were not stubbornness. An accusation without a finished file is not evidence. It is just a jealous old father making his boy choose, and boys who are made to choose too early tend to choose wrong. In my old work, we never showed a subject the file until the file was complete. You get exactly 1 moment of truth with a person. Spend it early, and you spend it cheap. And there was one more reason, the one that mattered most. As of that October, Brooke had not moved $1 single. Planning a wrong is not the same as doing one. If I stopped her too soon, in private, my son would spend his marriage married to a question. I needed him to see the answer with his own eyes. The first week of November, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. It was Gene. Thanksgiving is at our place this year, he said. Diane has decided, which means the governor himself could not change it. We talked walleye for a minute, because 2 old men cannot hang up a phone without discussing fish. And then, right before he went, his voice dropped about 1 degree. Come hungry, Harold, he said, and bring your reading glasses. Dial tone. I stood in my kitchen holding a dead phone for a long moment. Then I got out the notebook. Date, time, who, what. And under why, for the first time since June, I wrote a single question mark. Thanksgiving morning, I dressed the way I always dress. The gray cardigan with Ruth's stitching in the elbow. Then I loaded the jacket. Notebook number 181, with a gas receipt taped inside from a marathon station in Richmond, Indiana. A fold of printouts in the inside pocket. And a flat black leather case I had not opened in 6 years. I opened it that morning at the kitchen table and looked for a while at the younger man in the photograph. And then I looked at Ruth's picture on the shelf and asked her out loud if I was doing this for the right reason. The house said what houses say. Nothing. Which from Ruth always meant, you already know. Last, I took 2 envelopes off my desk. One was addressed, in my own block printing, to the compliance department of Meridian Crest Wealth Partners. The other was blank. I put them both in my jacket, one behind the other, and I drove my old truck up to Westerville with the radio off. Some drives you make in silence on purpose. The Callahan house smelled like sage and wood smoke, and for the first hour, I want you to know, it was simply Thanksgiving. Diane hugged me at the door. Jean shook my hand and held my eyes half a second longer than a handshake needs. Daniel got me a root beer because he knows I do not drink anymore. Brooke kissed my cheek and said Happy Thanksgiving, Harold, because in 3 years she had never once called me anything but Harold. We ate well. We talked about walleye and 8th graders. I would be lying if I said I did not enjoy that hour. Condemned men enjoy their breakfast too. Then the pie was delayed, and Brooke stood up at her end of the table and smoothed her sweater and said the words I had been waiting since June to hear out loud. Before dessert, she said, just one small piece of housekeeping. There it was, the word. She brought the burgundy folder from the sideboard and slid it down the tablecloth to me, and you already know what I found inside, because you were with me at the top of this story. The power of attorney with my name typed and waiting. The list of concerns. The 11th of October. What you do not know yet is what everybody did next. Daniel spoke first, low, to her. Brooke, we said after the holidays. She patted his shoulder without looking at him. It is just paperwork, babe. I read every page at my own speed while the table held its breath. Then I folded my hands on the leather and asked one question, in the voice I used to use across steel tables. Who wrote the entry for the 11th of October? Brooke's smile stayed up like a storm window. Harold, we have all noticed things, she said. This is not an attack. It is a plan, made from love. I asked it again. The 11th of October. Who wrote it? She lifted her chin a little. I compiled the concerns, yes. So I reached into my jacket and took out the notebook, and I read them my own entry for that day, exactly as I wrote it that night. 11th of October. Left the house 6:40 in the morning. Funeral of Raymond Delgado. St. Benedict's, Terre Haute, Indiana. Home 9:15 at night. Then I peeled the receipt off the inside cover and laid it next to the gravy boat. Gas. Marathon Station, Richmond, Indiana. Dated and timed. I was not wandering around a pharmacy, Brooke, I said. I was burying the man who taught me to write everything down. She was pale now, but she is a professional, and professionals recover. Anyone can keep a receipt, she said. And honestly, this level of documentation, this is part of what worries us. A couple of nervous half-laughs started around the table and died young. Because my son was not laughing. Dad documents everything, Daniel said quietly. He always has. It was one sentence, and it was my boy stepping 1 inch off her boat, and she felt the deck move. You keep using the word confused, I said. So before we go any further, you should probably know what my last job title was. I took out the flat black case, set it on Diane's white tablecloth, and opened it facing down the table. The gold badge. The photograph of a younger man. The card that reads United States Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation, Special Agent Harold J. Brenner, retired. Nobody moved. The football game murmured to itself in the other room. Dad, Daniel finally said, what is this? For 32 years I chased money for the federal government, son, I said. Embezzlement, laundering, fraud. I told people I was a bookkeeper because it made a certain kind of person comfortable enough to keep talking. And because your mother liked me humble, Diane's hand had gone to her mouth. "You carried a gun," she whispered. "And a calculator, ma'am," I said. "The calculator did more damage. Now, if your jaw just did what my son's jaw did, stay right here with me, and maybe tap that like button while you are at it. Because everything so far was only the warm-up. What came out of my jacket next is the reason this story exists." I unfolded the printouts. The first page, I turned so the whole table could see. "There is a free public website called BrokerCheck," I said. Spelled just how it sounds. brokercheck.finra.org. It will show you the license and the record of any financial advisor in America. And if you people take one thing away from tonight besides pie, take that. Then I read them what it showed for Brooke Callahan. The customer dispute, 4 years ago. The elderly widow. The allegation of unauthorized trading. Settled, $95,000. No admission. "That settlement is not what it looks like," Brooke said. "Settlements never are," I said. So I kept reading. And then, in the flattest voice I own, I gave them the second page. The condo refinanced twice. The equity line in April. The margin call in August. $278,000 of debt, with about $9,400 going out the door every month. The merger. The new number handed down from Chicago. $25 million by the 31st of December, or termination. And a book of clients sitting at 22.9. "You are 2 million short," I said. "And my accounts hold 2.3. And between those two numbers there was exactly one signature line, and it had my name typed under it. I tapped the folder. I was never family in this plan, Brooke. I was inventory. She looked like a woman standing in a doorway watching her house burn. "You investigated me," she said, barely above a whisper. "You diagnosed me," I said. "Only one of us used facts." Daniel stood up so fast his chair barked against the floor. "Is it true?" he said. "The debt. The deadline. Look at me, Brooke. Is it true?" She looked at her lap. And Diane, who had not said a word in 10 minutes, said, "Brooke Ann Callahan. Answer him." Before she could, I laid the two envelopes on the cloth, side by side next to the receipt. "This one," I said, "is addressed to the compliance department at Meridian Crest. What is inside it ends your career by Monday lunch. This one is blank. I have carried them both for 3 weeks, and I have not licked a stamp, because the next few minutes do not belong to me. They belong to you." That was when Gene stood up. He folded his napkin like he was closing a register, and he said, "Before my daughter answers, she ought to know she was not only answering Harold tonight." Wednesday evening, he told the table, Brooke had come by with the folder and asked her parents to back the plan at dinner. A united front, she called it, for Harold's own good. 40 years behind a pharmacy counter, Gene said, taught me that the most dangerous errors come in clean handwriting. So after everybody went to bed, I read that folder twice. And I found 2 things, he said. The notary line was blank, and in this state that document is not worth the toner without a notary, which told me the actual signing was planned for somewhere quiet, later, and quick. And then there was the 11th of October. Harold, you told me at the cookout you would be in Terre Haute come fall for an old partner's funeral. I remembered, because men our age keep a running count of funerals. And just to be certain, I called Chuck, who has owned that pharmacy for 25 years and fills my blood pressure pills. Nobody wandered anything. He turned to his daughter, and his voice went down to gravel. So I told her, if this plan is honest, it can stand daylight. Present it at the table, in front of the man himself. And my little girl looked me in the eye and agreed, because she believed the fellow in the mended cardigan would sign anything at all rather than lose Sunday dinners with his son. His eyes were shining now. I have spent 2 days hoping to be wrong at this table, he said. I have never in my whole life wanted so badly to be wrong. Brooke did not cry the way people cry in the movies. Her hands went flat on the tablecloth, like someone steadying furniture inside herself, and when she finally spoke, her client voice was gone, and what was left was younger and worse. I have not moved $1, she said. I need everyone to hear that first, because it is the only clean thing I have left. But I printed that folder. I wrote those dates. I told Daniel his father was slipping, and I told myself it was protection, and by about the 3rd time I said it, I almost believed me. She pulled in a breath that shook. The margin call came in August and I stopped sleeping. And every plan you make at 2 in the morning sounds reasonable by breakfast. Daniel's voice, when it came, was quiet, which from my son is worse than shouting. You wrote my father up like a case file, he said. You used my birthday to do it. And he walked out to the porch, and the storm door clicked shut behind him, which somehow was louder than a slam. I looked at Brooke across the wreckage of Thanksgiving, and I said the truest thing I know. In 32 years, I sat across a table from hundreds of people who crossed the line you are standing on right now. Not one of them planned to become a criminal. Every single one of them planned to fix one bad month, and then the month fixed them. You have not crossed it. As of tonight, that is a fact, not a defense. The only question left is what you do standing here. She looked at the 2 envelopes for a long time. Then she reached across the table and picked up the one with the address on it. I will take this one, she said. If it comes from you, it is an accusation. If it comes from me, she swallowed, it is a beginning. The blank envelope went back into my jacket. Keep it in mind, it matters later. On Monday morning, Brooke and an attorney walked into the compliance department at Meridian Crest, and she laid the folder on the table herself. The plan, the debt, the appointment she had made with my brokerage in my name. Because not one client dollar had ever actually moved, there was no crime to charge. There was, however, a career to end, and she ended it with her own hands. She resigned and gave up her licenses, and if you are wondering whether that kind of thing stays quiet, it does not. Resignations like that go on the record, on that very same public website I told you about, which is exactly as it should be. In January, she sold the condo in the short north and moved to a 1-bedroom in Grandview. The leased German car went back, and a used Honda showed up with a dent in the fender she calls character. She sat down with a non-profit credit counselor and turned $9,400 a month from a noose into a number with an end date. And she took a bookkeeping job at a hospice organization in Columbus for about 1/5 of her old salary and, she says, about 5 times the sleep. The engagement went on the shelf, and I want you to hear that it was her doing, not my son's. I will not walk down an aisle I have not earned back, is what she told him. She started counseling that winter, every week, sometimes with Daniel, and once, in February, with me. That was the hardest hour of coffee I ever sat through, and the most honest. At the end of it, she asked me what all those people across all those interview tables had in common. I told her the truth. Every one of them was somebody's Brooke. My son took longer, and he should have. For a few weeks he went quiet on her, and I stayed out of it, because a father who has just been proven right has exactly one job, and that job is to shut up. But I will tell you how I knew which way he would land. My boy grades in green ink, because green means you can still grow. Somewhere over that long winter, he decided to grade the woman he loved the same way he grades everybody. Not a pass, a chance to revise. Along about February, Brooke started turning up at the Skyline Diner some Tuesdays. The first visit lasted 10 minutes and was mostly cream and sugar and silence. The next one, she asked about Ruth. The one after that, she asked about the cases, and I told her a few, the ones with lessons in them. And then one morning she pulled a little notebook out of her purse, wrote down what the eggs cost, and grinned at me sideways, and I very nearly choked on my coffee. In June, I gave her something I had been holding on to. Ruth's actual peach cobbler recipe, the real card, in Ruth's handwriting, grease spots and all. Your third try was close, I told her. This is the map. She held that card with 2 hands, like evidence. In a way, it was. Sometime after New Year's, Daniel finally asked me what had been inside the second envelope, the blank one. I took it out of the desk drawer and opened it in front of him. It was empty. He looked at me. Empty, he said. The addressed one was the ending she earned if she chose wrong, I told him. This one was empty, because the other ending had not been written yet. She is writing it now. And Jean. Jean and I fish Cedar Creek Lake once a month now. 2 old fathers in a boat, talking about walleye and children, both of which are slippery. About once a trip he tries to apologize to me for his daughter, and about once a trip I tell him what I will tell you. A tree that grows crooked in a storm can still grow straight afterward, if somebody stakes it, and if nobody stands around pretending there was no storm. This past spring, a senior center over in Kettering gave me 40 folding chairs, a coffee urn with opinions, and a Tuesday afternoon time slot. The class is called Ask Twice, Sign Once. It is the best classroom I have ever stood in. I teach the red flags. The renamed words, housekeeping, paperwork, simplify, the kind comments that shrink you an inch at a time, the helpful phone calls you never made, and running the projector, every single Tuesday, is a 37-year-old former financial advisor who opens every session the same way. I am not here because I caught a fraud, she tells them. I am here because I almost committed one, and the man in the second row read me twice. You have not lived until you have watched 40 gray heads all write down brokercheck.finra.org at the same time. It looks like a choir copying down the hymn. Then October came, and with it a small wedding in my backyard, under the maple Ruth planted the year Daniel was born. 30 chairs on the grass. Gene walked his daughter down an aisle of raked leaves, and Marcy Kowalski sat in the second row crying, which she will deny under oath. My son read his vows off a note card written in green ink. There was pie instead of cake, and there was peach cobbler, and the cobbler was right. Finally, exactly, right. And if you think an old man did not have to step behind the garage for a minute over a pan of cobbler, then you have never been a widower at a wedding. And at the end of the night, after the last dance, Brooke came and found me by the fence with a small wrapped box. Inside was a brown leather pocket notebook. On the first page, in her handwriting, were 4 words I have written every day since 1978. Date, time, who, what, and underneath them, a 5th line. Why? Because family reads each other twice. Then she kissed my cheek and said, "Good night, Dad." First time. Not Harold, Dad. That notebook is number 182 on my shelf, and it is the only one that was worth keeping before I ever wrote a word in it. People sometimes ask me whether that Thanksgiving nearly destroyed our family. They are asking the wrong question. That folder did not change us. It read us out loud, every one of us, and once a thing has been read out loud, you can finally fix the sentence. My wife knew that. If you want to know what a person is truly made of, let them believe you are easy to fool. But Ruth would want me to tell you the second half, the half it took me 74 years to learn. Once you find out what they are made of, your job is not always to punish it. Sometimes your job is to stake the tree. So here is what I want you to do tonight. If somebody came to mind while you were listening, a parent, a neighbor, a stubborn old friend in a mended cardigan, call them before pride does the dialing. Look up that website for someone you love. Ask twice. Sign once. And if this story earned its place in your evening, share it with somebody who needs it. Tell me in the comments what you would have done with those 2 envelopes. And subscribe, because there are 182 notebooks on my shelf. And some of those stories deserve a little daylight too.